Howdy, and welcome to episode 113 of In the Rabbit Holes Urban Survival Podcast. In this episode, we're joined by James Price of Death Valley Magazine, who's going to tell it like it really is, punch us in our bags, and throw a bottle of pee out the window as we ride crazy through the third world country. I'm your host, Aaron, and you are in the rabbit hole, safe and sound. All right, very special guest for you guys today, and we worked a long time to get this together, and he was even nice enough to do it with a 13-hour time difference between us. So welcome to the show, James Price of Death Valley Magazine.
How you doing, Aaron? It's great to be on the show. I've been a listener for a while since we started talking, I guess, over a year ago.
Yeah.
And even though I called in late because I messed up the time changes again. Here, Bangkok, and you're being in Central Time.
Yeah. Well, man, I really appreciate it. And one of my big questions is, what prompted you to start Death Valley Magazine?
I started Death Valley Magazine. Funny enough that I'm in Bangkok right now. I was on leave in Bangkok, which is a popular place for guys who do contracting to go to when they have time off, because you can't spend more than 30 days in the States or you have to pay taxes. Mm-hmm. So most guys will do. Most guys are on 3 months, off 1 month, on 3 months, off 1 month. So they spend 2 of their vacations overseas, which is always here. But I was here with my brother and a buddy of mine, Tom Moore, who's on the TV show Dude, You're Screwed Now.
Oh, yeah. I was about to mention, I kept seeing a guy on there with a Death Valley Magazine patch on his arm.
Yeah. I'm meeting up with him in a couple days over here.
Oh, neat.
Yeah, he's an old buddy. I met him on one of my first contracts. But, yeah, we were over here, and my brother and I, we've been into, like, tactical stuff for a long time, and we were always talking about the real lack of individuals who've use the equipment in like a combat or not necessarily just combat, just an actual setting where they're using the equipment on a daily basis, combined with the complete void of any personality and any sort of like tactical writing or gear reviews and things like that, which come off very sterile sounding and not interesting at all. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the gear that's being reviewed were things that we don't use necessarily as contractors. So we thought it would be kind of just on a whim. So we actually drew the idea of Death Valley Magazine as kind of sounds like funny, but literally on the back of a cocktail napkin in a bar in Bangkok, just saying, hey, I'm going to start this little magazine, just kind of do reviews, and we'll just kind of email all our buddies in the contractor community and just do it kind of as fun. So we started it. I got this cheap blogger site and with this horrible Death Valley Magazine logo with like skulls and flames and grenades and machine guns and things like that. Uh-huh. Started posting the article here, review there, some commentary about contracting, satire. And Mil-Spec Monkey, which most people in the community know who he is, he liked the magazine. He sent me an email and he said, I'm going to link to it on my website. So he linked to it and the stats went up. Then Eric Graves, about a year later, posted it on Soldier Systems, which gets about almost 4 million views a month. And that really, really kind of changed the game with DVM, blowing it up from just a kind of a hobby thing to, taking it a little more seriously, trying to write a little bit more. Now it's kind of come to what it is now, which is from a magazine to a training company and adventure tours and gear and everything. It's really amazes me all the time that it's went from just a $2 blog into what it is now.
That's really cool. I didn't realize you guys were doing training now.
Yeah, actually, we're just this week, we're starting our first training class, which is going to be an online-based class. It's actually Thomas Moore, his Tomahawk Scout class, which is a modern update on the Navajo Scouts that were based in Arizona. And from all his experience in the outdoors and as a Pathfinder, he took all of that, took the original training that Navajo Scouts got, and then updated it with modern equipment, modern techniques, and things like that. So it's a bit different than your average wilderness survival using ferro rods and, hunting squirrels with slingshots to, using GPSs and camp stoves and having a cell phone with you and things like that. So it's a really interesting program. And I realize these days is people cannot, especially with the economy and the way things are, people cannot just take a week off of work, fly to another city, spend thousands of dollars doing that, then take a class and go back. It just, people can't do it anymore. People can't lose a couple grand in the middle of the month. So we decided to make it an online based learning class. So people anywhere in the world can take it at their convenience.
Oh man, that's really neat. That's really neat. It's amazing how I'm involved in some of that in my daily professional life, and it is amazing how much easier that does make getting training on specific things for people.
Yeah, absolutely. Back in the day, I was kind of up in the air about training videos and correspondence learning. But when I was in Iraq, I simply had no time to train at all for any new skills. And on my leave times, I'd only get to spend a month, like I said before, only a month in the U.S. And I spent that time visiting my mom and dad and other family members. I didn't really want to take a tactical class. So then I started buying videos. And I mean, everyone's seen the Magpul videos and things like that. But there are a lot of them out there. And that's kind of the way I started adding skills to my toolbox. And certain skills can be transferable that way. Certain ones can't, like shooting from a helicopter probably can't. Wilderness survival skills, knife fighting, even self-defense when you have people to train with are skills that are absolutely learnable from a distance level.
Oh, very cool. Very cool. And I guess that in a lot of ways brings us into one of the big things I wanted to bring you on the show today, which was to talk about the application and real world stuff versus hypothesis and books and things like that from a guy like yourself who's actually been there, actually done it, actually seen it. So to start off, what do you think are the most commonly held kind of misconceptions? I mean, we can get past the BS bravado that we see on survival forums and all this other stuff, but as far as most commonly held misconceptions where it's just flat out wrong or just not quite right when people talk about it, even people like myself or whoever who haven't been in third world hellholes like you have.
Mm-hmm. Well, one of my biggest kind of pet peeves is the bug out bag, which has kind of been regurgitated for some time now on the internet. Where I am now in Bangkok, and there may be a coup here any day actually at this time, I absolutely have a bug out bag. But in the States, where nobody's going to abandon their home in the States, everyone talking about there very rarely is something that happens in such a furiously fast manner where you have seconds to leave your home in the United States. And for a long time, the idea of, okay, there's going to be some serious major events that's going to force you to leave your home at a moment's notice, which I cannot see happening. I mean, there are things like natural disasters and
chemical spills and things like that.
Spills or civil unrest and things like that. But even in a place like New Orleans, where kind of flooded up, people had time beforehand. They simply were uneducated on emergency management and some basic urban survival skills. And we're also a lot of people who are kind of in the situation where they rely on the government too much already. So they had a kind of a mindset of waiting around until someone helped them. But on very rare occasion, outside of like, say, in Japan when the nuclear plant went down where people had to leave suddenly, I don't see many situations where somebody in the States would have to bug out in 3 seconds. I don't see that happening. Nobody's going to leave their home. There's an emotional connection with you and your home. And even if the whole neighborhood is burning down, there are very few people who are willing to leave their home, abandon their home in any situation unless they're forced to. Most people will bug in, and I think bugging in seems to be a subject rarely or not mentioned as much as it should be. Mm-hmm. Because that's always been my plan in the States. I will bug in. I will stay in my home. Everyone has children, elderly family, parents, things like that. Going out in the open is the absolute last thing you want to do. And like here in the third world where I am now, bugging out is something that could happen, say, like in Indonesia. I believe it was the 97 during the currency crisis. there was major rioting, looting, murders, rapes going on in the city during the regime change with Suharto. The rioting moved to apartment blocks where the rioters were going floor to floor, door to door. Now, that happens in the third world because, one, firearms are not legal there. Nobody has them. And the police are extremely corrupt. In the United States, if a mob went into an apartment, I mean, I don't see that happening. Most of the people, if a mob tried to go into an apartment complex, most people would just end up getting shot by some guy like myself who owns a lot of guns. But in the third world, you don't have that option. So that is one of the situations where you want to bug out. But at the same time, you have warning. A coup, a regime change, any of these things, there's warning signs beforehand. Like right now in Bangkok, there's currently protesters on the street. So as long as you keep your ear to the ground, you'll know what's going on. Yeah, that's the bug out bag is always, for people in the States, has always been something that I found is kind of a waste because you already have all that equipment. Maybe it takes 10 minutes to actually pack it up if you had to. So why not just do that? And the other thing is I see a lot of people putting massive amounts of money into their bug out bags, yet not having enough money to live off of if they're laid off of work for a month. Mm-hmm. One of the absolute biggest things which are never or rarely spoken about is financial security in urban survival. It's the same thing as like if a mob comes to your house and kicks you out. If you lose your job and you can't pay your rent, mob's going to come over to your house and kick you out. And people, a lot of people in the survival community have a mentality where they are saying, "Oh well, I'll just trade guns and gold later." Well, that's not realistic. I heard people saying the exact same thing in the 80s, and it never happened. And I have deep doubts that America will turn into Uganda at any time in the near future. So when people ask me, said, "What is the thing I need to do to prepare myself for any event?" I always tell them, have 6 months of living expenses on hand. That's the most important thing. Money has always been, for any survival situation, if you look at any coup, any government going down, any natural disaster, those with a little bit of money in their pocket do fine. I remember when I was in Indonesia during the floods, I forgot which year that was, but they had a major flood there in Jakarta, where literally I was getting out of my apartment building, getting on a boat just to go somewhere. While these floods were going on and it was in the news and all these people were starving and drowning and didn't have toilets, as I was reading that, I got a phone call from a buddy of mine who was over at the Ritz-Carlton at the buffet eating prime rib.
Oh, wow.
If you have money, you will be fine during a natural disaster and an event. During the riots in Jakarta that I mentioned before, I had friends who simply brought $10,000 over to a military pilot and had him land a helicopter on their front lawn. If you have money, though, you can relocate, you can make options happen to yourself in an emergency, and at the same time, if you get laid off of work, you'll be fine for a couple months. So I think money is really, really one of the important things. I know a lot of people because I'm working class myself, I'm blue collar, and there's always been that mentality of the rich are evil and money's not important, and which is kind of tossed around a lot, which is not accurate at all. Money, of course, is important because it encompasses all aspects of our life. But a lot of guys kind of go on the bandwagon of, oh, well, we're just regular guys and those are them and we are who we are. So they try to physically prepare for things, not really financially prepare for things like they should.
Yeah, I think when your article, in a lot of ways, when you wrote it originally on Death Valley Magazine, it kind of opened my sights.
I got a lot of hate mail on that one.
Oh, I bet you did. But it was beautiful.
Don't ever question anything that's accepted in any community.
It was a beautiful article in that it did really point out an issue. I mean, like one of my big ones after I got over my original craziness of getting back into things, and one of the things I did was I had this 80-pound ruck. And it's funny, you always ask people what their bag is like, especially if they've only been in it about a year, maybe two. How much does your bag weigh? And it's usually like anywhere from 80 to 100 pounds. And, and you see these people at the same time, and they're in terrible physical condition. And it's like, you're going to try to hump an 80-pound ruck out of the city in the middle of the night. And
you're holding a rifle in open view.
And you can barely make it up a flight of stairs without really having to huff and puff. Some people are in better shapes than that, but even still, I mean, really dragging in one of those bags. I've done it before, and I did it when I was young. After you get over 3 days of it, it's not that bad, but you've got to make it through those first 3 days. And
Sure.
most people just aren't in that kind of shape. And that's, I mean, I do keep a bag, and I keep a lot of different bags. In general, I do it just so I don't have to drag a bag around, so that there's always a bag somewhere near me. But it's usually more stuff that I actually find that I do use on a yearly basis. Like I get in my truck and I go somewhere and it's cold and crap, I forgot to put gloves on. Open up the bag, I got a pair of gloves in there and things like that. And just simplify things to what is the absolute lightest. And the other thing is I look at it and it's like I look at my first bag and I've got a double fusion. I'm not going to move with any sort of, I'm in the physical condition to do it, but from a standpoint of what's comfortable and how long is it going to be before my back really starts hurting, I'm not going to move an 80-pound ruck.
Sure, absolutely.
So, but yeah, I bet you got a lot of hate mail because I think that is people's favorite thing to do, especially right after rifles, are building bug out bags.
Sure. And one thing people misunderstand, I'm not telling you not to. That's the other thing. I'm just saying that it's not necessary, but you can do it. Sure, it's fun. It's a hobby or something like that. But there are other priorities that you should put ahead of spending $500 on a bug out bag.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, definitely. So James, moving on to off the bug out bag and moving on to other things, as far as misconceptions go, they're the ideals and things and the zombie apocalypses, even though I know you hate the letter Z, but there's the zombie apocalypse mentality, which is fun to imagine and fun to play with, but then there's the reality
absolutely.
Of what really happens, like that first 24 hours all the way through real breakdown and lawlessness and emergencies.
Yeah, well, one of the things I mentioned before is simply looking at warning signs. If you pay attention to what's going on, you have your ear to the ground, you know people in the local community, wherever you are, pay attention to the news and don't get too emotional about it. There are always warning signs that something will happen. And if it seems bad enough, you can leave. But people tend to more focus on what do I do when it happens than how do I forewarn myself of this happening, which is substantially more important, especially for someone like myself who spends a large amount of time living or informally operating in the third world. Is prevention is really the biggest thing that I've always focused on. Of course, being prepared when the event happens or if it happens is absolutely necessary, but knowing that it is going to happen and then being able to go around it is always the smarter option, I believe.
Mm-hmm. What kind of warning signs, I mean, since you've seen them, what kind of warning signs do you typically see in those areas? Is there a commonality or is it always kind of this different, you know it, you see it, shit starts happening?
It can be something as simple as one of your local fixers saying, hey, this is going on. Or one of the things, I don't know if you know who Jim Rogers is, but he's a big finance guy.
Mm-hmm.
He wrote a couple books where he traveled around the world, and he says, one of the people that he listens to the most in the third world are prostitutes because they always have their ear to the ground of what's going on. So that's one of the sources I've always also listened to. It's always good to have someone who kind of in more of the black economy because they tend to pay attention more to things that small shifts tend to affect their finances more than, say, a banker or someone like that. And so you watch out for signs such as if there's uprest that seems to be coming, or if there is the economy seems to be going down, especially in the third world. It's always about economy. It's always about money. And that tends to spark things off most of the time. In a non-permissive environment such as Iraq, where I used to operate on a road team, it would be in local intelligence sources. They would say, hey, all these firearms and guns or weapons or foreign fighters are heading into this town. So instead of saying, okay, let's prepare for a shootout when we go through that town, we simply say we will avoid that town, which is always the smarter view. It's great to have guns, great to have shooting and skills and all these things. The absolute goal at the end is never to use any of those skills, simply to pass it on. And I know that a lot of guys have an idea. It's like, oh, I want to get it on or all these other things. That's foolish thinking. Those are guys that get killed. I mean, there's a big reason why 18-year-old Marines are the ones who take beachheads
Mm-hmm.
because they're the only ones who want to. Anyone like guy, I'm 40, and at this point in my life, I'm like, I really don't want to get killed. I like
Mm-hmm.
to avoid conflict. And also, you have to remember, maybe you have family, friends, or even a team of people. You're responsible for them too. So, as a lot of things in the survival community seem focused on putting yourself in the situation, not absolutely avoiding it at all costs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that is an excellent point. And going back to the egress and stuff, it was funny. I was sitting with somebody the other night. We were talking about what was going on in Kiev, and it was like that stuff was bubbling to the surface over the course of the last year. It just needed that kind of final strike of the match to really set it off.
Sure.
And then the same thing in Venezuela right now, which is oddly barely in the news.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, like I said, there are warning signs. Even in the local paper, you can see the warning signs. But the locals are talking, and when something like that happens, you come to a point where you have to make a decision. You say, "Hey, do I stay? Do I bug in? What do I do?" And me, I tend to bug in, but I'm a little bit different situation than most people. Personally, I would suggest for most people, if it seems like something ominous is going on and looks like an event will happen, I would always suggest that people leave.
Mm-hmm.
Myself, I don't practice what I preach necessarily, but I feel like I'm in a situation where I'm mobile. Also, I don't have a family, which makes it easier for me to be able to do whatever I want to do. But yeah, there's always warning signs, and people tend to look at these situations like they say, "Oh well," I say, "Well, I say, you don't really necessarily have to have a bug out bag ready to leave in 3 seconds notice." And they'll say, "Well, look at what's happening in Kiev right now. The whole city's falling apart." I'm like, I could have told you that was going to happen a year ago.
Yeah.
So it's being smart about things, having an exit plan, and really deciding what you're going to do. And most of the time, you have options of what you want to do, and the options aren't sexy necessarily, but they are viable. They're always take the safest route around an obstacle.
Yeah, you're not playing Call of Duty. We're talking real life here.
Yeah, and I mean, another thing in the community, I see a lot of people saying, "Well, it's like, if it comes down to it, I'll just blast some guy or blah blah blah." You know what? Dropping a trigger on a guy isn't exactly what most people assume it is, and you got to really decide to say, "Well, am I going to take the life of someone over a backpack full of shit or something like that?" I think the idea that killing is this simple, easy thing that a lot of machoism, and I know a lot of it's bullshit. It's just guys trying to sound tough on the internet. But like I did an aid mission in the Philippines during the Typhoon Haiyan there, and we were going through areas with we had our aid supplies in several trucks, and we are going through this one area where only a few days before one of the Marxist group, which still exists there. They're still trying to make a Marxist government.
Hmm.
But a Marxist group attacked one of the convoys trying to rob it, and a couple of the guys got killed. And we were going to go through that area 4 to 6 times. And so we, of course, had weapons available, but we also asked ourselves, are we willing to kill people over some noodles? Is that really something that we're going to do? Now, a lot of tough guys would be like, yeah, well, they're coming at us, and, if I got to kill someone, I got to do it. No, you don't want to. My decision at that time as being the team leader on that mission was, if we get attacked, we get the people out, we'll leave the shit behind. It's nothing that can't be replaced. So there seems to be like a real Rambo mentality about, I'm going to kill all these people and do what I have to do. But in reality, I've seen guys that, like in Iraq, when I worked as a security contractor there, I saw guys that were very highly trained militarily and in the private sector, but, haven't seen any combat time, go over there, kill a guy, and literally be like, I'm on the next plane out. I'm never going to do that again. And these are some like badass tough guys, tattoos all up and down their arms and beards. But the first time they kill someone, they say, you know what, I'm done for the rest of my life. I never want to work in this business again. So to think that you can, without hesitation, kill another man the first time or any time in general, it is such a kind of a juvenile thing that I see people talking about online, which is that's one of the things that's always bothered me. I mean, I understand that most of it is just bullshit and tough guy talk, But a lot of guys really believe that, oh, I'll just do this and I'll do that. I'll mow down a whole family if I have to. And it's bullshit. You're not going to do that. Most of the time, the first time I got shot at, I got in a shootout, I froze completely. I mean, I was like a mannequin, man. It was embarrassing. One of the other guys on the team who was more senior than I was had to yank me behind the truck.
Wow.
Yeah. Actually, he was yelling at me and shaking me. He was like, shoot back, shoot back. And so, I snapped out of it. But, I always had that same idea in my mind. I was like, man, if I ever got to get it on someday, I'm going to jump out there. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. I froze. That's generally the reaction. I've seen that reaction more times than I can count by guys the first time that they get into it.
Mm-hmm.
So most likely you're going to freeze and piss your pants anyway. Luckily, I didn't piss my pants, probably because I peed. I was fortunate enough to pee a lot because I always had a fear that if an IED goes off, I piss my pants, which is something you would never live down.
Uh-huh.
So I'll constantly be pissing in bottles in the trucks just so I would avoid that.
That was one of the funniest things when I was reading On Killing, that one of the funniest sections he talked about. I mean, it was obviously a serious thing, but I still have to kind of chuckle at it a little bit. He was talking about the real statistics of people once involved in a violent encounter, especially a shootout, how many of them actually pissed their pants. And he was like, they always hung their head down and then kind of very sheepishly raised their hand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've seen guys do it before. So I was always like, oh, man, I don't want to seem like a wuss, man. So I always had you see me throwing piss bottles out of the window of a truck all the time. Because that was always my big thing. I was like, I don't want to be that guy, because when it's kind of like guys who do convoy work, anyone who's been in the military, guys who've done security convoys like I did, they'll know dudes shit their pants eventually. It's unavoidable.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was another thing. I was like, if that happens, you will never live it down. So that was pretty much my main concern about that. But there are also other physiological reactions. I remember one time, I forgot, I think we were on Tampa in Iraq, driving down the road, and the IED went off. There's a new guy with us. He just buckled over, just out. And we thought he got hit. We thought we were in level 7 Suburban, but we thought he got hit. The guy in the back was checking him, looking, no wounds. He fainted.
Oh, wow.
And he's ex-military too.
Uh-huh.
He was infantry, never saw any combat, but he's infantry. He went through infantry training, airborne training. That's great training. But his body simply said, I cannot handle that. Go to sleep. So, and this is a military trained person. So you simply do not know what will happen during a stressful situation like that. Your body, your whole mind, your training, everything could say, go, fight, kill. Your body will say, protect yourself, go to sleep.
Wow. Yeah, I was reading, this was years ago, The Unthinkable. And that was one of the things she talked about, one of the myths she was dispelling, because Hollywood always shows all these movies with people running around with their hands over their head, acting like chickens with their heads cut off. And she was, after studying it, she was like, actually, most people really are like sheep. They just kind of go into this weird catatonic daze and follow anyone who exerts any sort of authority whatsoever, if anyone does. And that panic was actually very rare. It was more often people just kind of stand there like idiots.
Yeah, they shut down.
Mm-hmm.
Your body, it's just so many overwhelming things hitting your body at a single time that your mind simply just doesn't do anything. There's literally no thought going on until someone can snap you out of it.
Mm-hmm.
I always told myself, on the next time that happens, if I freeze again, I'm out. I'm done on this business. I'm not going to get someone killed. Fortunately, the next time I didn't freeze. So I was like, I guess I'm all right. I've seen that a lot too. Once you get that first initial hit of life or death situation, bullets running around or something like that happening, a lot of times it's kind of like getting it out of your system. Once you get it out of the system that first initial time, then you're good. But I've seen guys freeze on their 80th shootout. It just
really,
it's hard to explain what happens. You probably like PTSD. I know guys who were former Green Berets, served all around the world, went to Iraq, took one IED, and then are bundled up in a corner in their apartment for a year. You simply don't know how your mind, especially your mind and body, will react to stressful situations.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that guy I'm talking about is I mean, he was straight up Green Beret, saw serious action all around the world. First Gulf War, Somalia, all these places. And all it took was a little IED to turn his mind off. So you simply do not know how your mind and body will react to a stressful situation, no matter how experienced you are.
Oh, see, now that's interesting. I would have never expected that. I would have figured, like you were saying, you get it out of your system on the first run, and then after that, you're pretty much good, unless you see too much for too long, and then you kind of get squirrely in the noodle. But that somebody had already seen stuff like that, and then just all of a sudden, something just caught him on the right day, the wrong way, and he was kind of fit to be tied, so to speak.
Yeah. Also, your life changes. Maybe at that time when he was running around shooting and looting in the Green Berets, young single guy, not a care in the world. Now he's got kids. That can change your mindset. Hey, I actually care if I get killed. So it's just I don't know. The mind can only take so much after a certain amount of time. It protects itself.
That's wild, man.
Yeah, it's weird. I mean, the things that you see when guys are under fire or an ID goes off or something like that. I've seen a dude start just crying uncontrollably during a shootout, just bawling. He was shooting back, and he did good, but he was loading his magazines. He just couldn't stop doing it. And I mean, the next time he was all right, But I mean, it's crazy things. It's just weird under stress how your body reacts, and you're foolish to ever think that you'll react one certain way. It simply won't happen.
Yeah, somebody asked me. We were having I won't say who and I won't say exactly what we were talking about, but it was a goofy black helicopter conversation. And it was like, what would you do if they ever came for you? I was like, I'd be dead. I'll tell you right now. I don't have that level of training. They would come at a time of day when I would be at my deepest sleep, and I wouldn't know what the hell was happening until it was too late.
Sure.
But it was funny because going back to the bravado you were talking about, he just looked at me like I was crazy. Like, you wouldn't like jump up and run. I was like, I'd like to think I would, but I'd like to also think I'm a realist, and I know probably screwed at that point.
Well, I mean, I would be too, because what they would do is they wait for one night where I got really, really drunk, which is more often than not, and throw a flashbang through my window at 6 a.m. in the morning, and I'd wake up in a cell somewhere. Black choppers, that's something you need to talk to my brother about. That and FEMA camps.
Oh, yeah, the FEMA camps. Well, now we're into...
Oh, my God. I heard about that in the 80s, man, like an American survival guy. All these things that are going to happen with our government and all these other stuff, they just get regurgitated every generation.
Yeah.
And in the 80s, at least, I had a real threat of communism back then, Hey, maybe there could be an invasion. Maybe there would be a nuclear war, which would turn America into a wasteland. Now it's like, I mean, each generation has its nuclear bomb. Mine was nuclear annihilation. This one, everyone's talking about money and finances and economic collapses, things like SARS and other things and other communicable diseases. But I don't know. Maybe it's naive of me to think, but I think people are resilient, and there are a lot of smart people out there who can solve those problems. So. I don't know, man. I could be wrong. There could be a zombie apocalypse tomorrow, which, I mean, I'd be as happy as anyone else would, Give me a six-pack and sit on top of a building with my Barrett, but it's all good.
Oh, man, that's too funny. Yeah, I was, I was doing an interview with God, I just forgot the name of it, a geek podcast, and the topic was surviving the zombie apocalypse, and one of the jokes was, come on, you all know you wish for it to happen every day. There's that part of the day where somebody cut you off in traffic or something, and you're like, let the zombie apocalypse start with that guy. Yeah,
well, a lot of that comes from the psychology of not having control in your life. You got to take shit from a boss in a cubicle. You got to go home. Maybe your family life isn't what it wants to be. So you find a place where you can kind of fantasize and that has some connection to reality. I mean, I think it's kind of cool. I think, what's that name of that forum? Zombie Squad or something? They've been around for a long time.
Yeah.
I like how they say zombie is simply a replacement for the word disaster or emergency, but it makes it kind of fun. I mean, I got zombie patches, dude, so I'm not going to lie. I think it's funny, but and if that's the way people prep, then hey, even better.
Yeah.
That's one last person that emergency services have to go through during a natural disaster, So good on them.
It's funny, I think, because I grew up around the same time you did and remember all the Red Scare and the nuclear scare and everything like that. And it's funny, I don't think anything has done as much for prep since then as just the influx of the zombie culture.
Yeah, I don't even know where that came from, too. I mean, zombies were kind of always like Romero, and there's a definite fan base around it for a long time. But I'm not sure when the prepping and zombies kind of combined together. I think it's kind of interesting.
Yeah, it did just kind of spring up out of nowhere, or at least, and I know like World War Z, the book, not the awful freaking movie.
Oh my God, that movie made me want to jump out of a window after the zombies.
Never has there been a movie that had less to do with the book it came from. But
I know, and it's such a good source to work with too.
Well, it was amazing. I mean, they actually took the movie ends with the opposite message of the book.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was just very random. I mean, even before the book itself came out, like it was just this culture that just started overnight kind of building. It was really interesting to see where it came from.
I think it might have been, now that I think about it, zombies replaced communists.
Yeah, I
think
could see that.
Be what it is. Yeah, because there was a kind of a point in the States where after communism was over, before the terrorism and things like that started happening, where there was a somewhat of a relative calm as far as the threats to the United States and threats to yourself. When I guess during that time it was a lot of the crack wars and drug wars and things like that, but that was mostly in like the inner city. So I guess in the more suburban areas there wasn't that looming threat anymore. So maybe zombies are the new Ivan.
Yeah, that could be. Yeah, I guess it was about what, 92 up until the time we got until we had the Y2K silly scare. Basically, we had nothing to really worry about except everybody, like you were saying, the Bloods and the Crips and AIDS and crack and stuff like that. But that wasn't like nuclear war or like a whole nother nation of our own size and strength coming after us. So it wasn't really that scary. It was like, all right, just stay out of that part of town and, well, wear a condom.
Yeah, so. That's pretty much it. I will probably someday track it down to a guy who owns a survival store online or something. That was like, man, I need to think of something people gotta be scared of because I got rent to pay.
Yeah. It could have been Alex.
Some New York marketing firm invented the zombie apocalypse.
Yeah. I was on Drudge the other day and I clicked on it. It was talking about like 100,000 rounds of sniper ammo and all this stuff. And it was.
God, I see those things on my Facebook wall. I'm like, okay.
But it was funny. I was looking at it. I was like, well, that's actually a very low number but it's funny what people were
rounds is nothing, man.
Yeah, I was like, I could see. I mean, if somebody was going to give me that much ammo and say your living is now punching holes at paper at 1,000 yards, I'd be like, sweet, I'll go through 100,000 rounds. I mean, probably not,
yeah, absolutely.
But I mean, that's really not that much. And you've got the Alex Joneses of the world that are like, oh my God, they're FEMA camps, and then they're going to shoot us with the zombie max ammo.
Yeah, I know. And people, I mean, when I was in Iraq, for 6 months, I was a foreign weapons instructor for security contractors, military folks like that for a company that I will not name. But we would have 100 people come to the range every day and qualify and train with the AK-47, firing maybe 500-800 rounds each. So 100,000 rounds is nothing, man. We go through 1 million rounds easy. You'd be surprised how often, if you're training people, how much ammo you burn through. So I remember, like, did we order 1 million rounds like a few weeks ago? It's like, that shit's gone, dog. It's not there anymore.
Wow.
So you got to look at the industry. And so much emotion is in this community, which I think needs to be taken away. But it's also connected to the same thing, the hope of, man, if this happens or FEMA camps are real and there's a civil war, that's the whole civil war in the United States, a silly concept. It's been around since the 80s also, and zombie apocalypse, and I won't have to take shit from my boss anymore. I don't have to worry about this credit card payment that I can't make. So, and then, like, I start talking about in my articles or to people's responses to questions, hey, save money, blah, 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 think about your future. take that money you're going to spend on that next AK and take a welding class. So now you have an extra skill. And people are like, oh, that's bullshit, BS, blah, blah, blah. I don't know. It's an odd community where a lot of the old ideas have been regurgitated.
Yeah, it seems like that's going on for a very long time, where they just maybe get repackaged slightly, but it's always the same stuff over and over. And unfortunately, there aren't enough voices in the community like yourself that preach, hey, why don't you go get a useful skill that if you decided tomorrow you didn't want to be a private contractor, welding pays really well.
Yeah.
I mean, I've known welders that, even far back as, say, 15 years ago, were making six figures as a welder.
Yeah, absolutely. The same people who say, don't over specialize, learn how to use an AK, an AR, a knife, hand to hand, yet they're a computer programmer and have no other skills at all in order to provide for themselves and their family.
Mm-hmm.
I always tell people have two skills, a white collar skill and a blue collar skill, and you will always be able to work.
Mm-hmm. So now you brought up an interesting thing about AKs, and I'm curious. I've never been an AK guy. You really find the AK? You personally like the AK better than the AR, and I'm not challenging you on it personally. I like M1s, but I'm just always curious what other people's favorite rifles are.
Before, when I was stateside, I always liked the AR. I think it's a good weapon. There's controversy about the round, but I mean, if you shoot some guy 6 times in the chest, it doesn't matter what you have. So that's kind of a moot point right there.
Mm-hmm.
I think the AR is an excellent weapon for anyone operating. They have first world support. Like if you're running missions out of a base in Afghanistan, you go out, do your mission, go back in. Where you have access to what we used to call in Iraq the Golden Connex, which is a unlimited supply of ACOGs and flashlights and mounts and grips and all these other things. But if you're in a situation like I was as a mobile team leader, where you got one rifle and it's a wooden stock, you run it stock, you use it that way. For myself, I've always liked the AK-47. Also, there's cleaning issues. A lot of guys think that, oh, okay, I'll clean my rifle every night. Well, you know what? After you've been on a 7-day long, 18, 22-hour day missions, you're not going to want to clean your rifle. You're going to go back, have a beer, and deck out, which is realistic. So for myself, I've always liked the AK in a non-permissive environment or in a situation where you're not really going to be able to maintain your weapons very well. I like the larger round. I shoot semi-auto. I don't shoot full auto, which is another thing. A lot of ex-military guys, they like the M4 because you can put out a good blast full auto on it and stay on target. You can't do that with the AK. If you rip out on the AK, you're going to shoot birds down from the sky by the 20th round pops out.
Mm-hmm.
Especially when you use shorty AKs like I do. I mean, the thing's like a flamethrower when you fire it. So I'm a semi-automatic shooting guy. And so that's why I like the bigger round. I think it's easy to manipulate. I mean, it was literally made for a 12-year-old to shoot. So there are very few mechanics to remember. Push down and then shoot. That's it. That's all you got to worry about. Maintenance issues, you can run them forever. When I was told that job previously where I told you where I was doing training, we would have those guys firing hundreds of thousands of rounds through those AKs, and then we'd throw them all in a Connex. The next day we'd get up. Most of them would be rusted shut. We'd jump start the bolt open, spray a little WD-40 in them, lay them all out, let guys fire another 1,000 rounds to it. We did that for months and months before we finally were forced to clean them just because they were so gross.
Oh,
so,
wow.
I mean, the weapon runs, and it doesn't stop. But it's a personal preference. Like stateside, if I did like a PSD or EP job or something stateside where I had to, on a very rare occasion, you would have a long weapon around, which generally doesn't happen, I'd absolutely use an AR because I got like a frog lube on it. I got my aim point scope, got a little flashlight on the side, And at the end of the day, after my 8-hour shift, I'll be able to go back and clean it up or have someone clean it for me. So, I mean, it's all personal preference, My brother likes the FAL. He's like no other weapon but the FAL. Big bullet, excellent accuracy with a very short barrel. So, I mean, it really comes down to the person and the environment. The environment is one of the important things, It's like getting good AR magazines that weren't all jacked up in Iraq was impossible. So use an AK. There are a million of them. You can buy brand new manufactured ones packed in Cosmoline on the literally on the street corner. So, I mean, it's about supply and demand, where you're going to be, the ammunition availability, also then personal preference. I mean, there were guys that I ran convoys with who liked the AR, so they used it. So I like the AK. I'm just an AK guy. Maybe because I was forced to use it for so long. Initially, I was not actually at all, but I learned to love it.
No, that makes sense. And that was interesting. You brought up about buying them on the street and stuff like that. Do you actually find that in those areas, it's actually, and I guess most of those areas, weapons are technically not legal. Is that correct?
Yeah. I mean, I think when I first got there, we were literally buying guns out of the trunks of cars on the Kuwait border. But eventually, when law came, I think the law was family could have one AK-47 or something like that for home defense. But yeah, generally speaking, weapons are legal everywhere, but the U.S., Sweden, and Philippines, I think. So yeah, generally speaking, but I mean, all it does is create a black market for firearms. I mean, I could literally go outside where I am now in Bangkok and buy an M60 if I took enough time and money to it.
And that goes back to the adage of, not that you're a criminal, but that goes back to the adage of when guns are made illegal, it's only people that aren't supposed to have them end up with them.
Yeah, it's only criminals and the elite who will have access to firearms. I mean, you don't think that like billionaires and stuff don't have guns in the third world. I mean,
yeah. So they got to hang on to that money somehow.
Yeah, absolutely.
Have you found in doing any of the training, what have you found the most productive for you and I guess the guys that you've worked with in doing tactical training? What methods have you found actually to be the most advantageous that really does develop that muscle memory and everything else when hopefully you don't pee your pants or stand around like a mannequin?
Yeah. My form of training is a lot different from like the Magpul way, the Navy SEAL way, things like that. The way that they train is extremely good when you have 8 hours a day, 7 days a week to train, to create the muscle memory. Most people, they got a job, they got families, they can't sit around their house, loading and unloading magazines all day and then spending $2,000 on ammo every week just to train. So I encourage people to train and to practice is using, I think it's called the triune brain. I can't remember, but it's basically movements that come naturally to you every day. You move your hand up, you scratch your face. So if you knife fight, that's the way you knife fight. When you pick up a box, you imagine a way that you pick up a box and then put that same motion to a weapon, hand on the handle, the other one behind the magazine. Things like that. I know it's not the best way to shoot. It's the way that you'll remember under a stressful situation because you do it 200 times a day already. So when I would train people, and I rarely train people now, I do some private client. I don't like training, but I train people to use movements that they use every day already, not to use extremely complicated, flipping around methods, hand all the way up on the rail, things that they don't do on a daily basis because during a highly stressful situation, especially the first time or even the 60th time, most guys who do not live the life, who do not train on a daily basis, who are not operational all the time, simply will not remember those things. So in my opinion, people should train in a way that they will not have to remember anything, basically, if that makes sense.
No, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah. And I mean, a lot of people criticize me for it. I mean, the guys will see pictures of me on Facebook or on DVM and they'll say, oh, you're holding your M4 with your hand on the mag well. That's not the way you're supposed to shoot. I was like, well, it's the way I've done it for a long time and it seems to work for me and I don't have to think, But if you have a lot of time to train, if you've got 8 hours to train and then you're running a mission in a hostile environment, non-permissive environment every few days, then hell yeah, train the most complicated, hardest way you can. That is the best way, the best technique, because you have the ability to do that. If not, don't train somewhere where you got to remember 20 different things to be able to reload a magazine.
That's really good advice. I like that. I'm going to have to remember that.
Because it's not sexy either.
Yeah.
That's what a lot of guys, it's just just pick up a rifle, hold it like you're holding a box and shoot. That doesn't seem cool. You can't really make a video doing it, but it works. And if one thing I did notice that even guys who are trained all different ways, you see them in their first shootout, that's how they hold their rifle, hand behind the mag well, because it comes naturally. Grip it to hold it. It's the same. It's also a nurturing skill comes in when your caveman brain goes off. It's also kind of hugging something or holding something to protect it. And so naturally your body will go to that position. So I always tell people, shoot that way if you're not able to train 8 hours a day. But I'm hardly a training expert too. A lot of this is what I've seen. I've actually never had any formal firearms training, so I kind of learned things on my own and created techniques that worked for me where, my small brain could remember.
No, and I think it speaks to the fact that you hadn't gotten yourself dead yet, so you're doing something right.
Luckily, not yet.
Yeah.
I'm sure some angry husband will eventually shoot me with a double shotgun someday, but until then, I think I'll be all right. And shit, man, my skills get rusty. I mean, I was on the range a few weeks ago, about a month ago in Texas, and it wasn't sharp as it used to be. That's because before, I'd sit in Iraq, I'd sit in front of the TV watching TV, loading and unloading my magazines on my AK. So I mean, it's not like riding a bike necessarily. The muscle memory is still there, but when you don't do it for a while, you start fumbling. So that's why I like, for myself, this is everything I talked about the training before. It is based on myself. I know most people are very similar to me as far as their memory goes and muscle memory goes. So that's why I always say, just do something really, really simple.
Going back to like the weapons and along that line, what kind of stuff do you typically see in the way of less sexy supplies, or it can even be sexy supplies, but even goods that kind of just vanish overnight when shit kind of starts going sideways?
I think in the third world, a lot of luxury goods get bought up. I don't know what's connected with that.
Really?
Yeah, you have a harder time finding that $10,000 Rolex during a civil unrest in some third world countries. Which is one of the things I thought was interesting. Was a friend of mine lived through the Jakarta riots where the government changed and said that the Ferrari dealership sold a lot of cars. I thought that was kind of weird. I don't know. Maybe people are trying to get to hard goods or something like that instead of cash money. I mean, because I know another guy who was there and he got through a roadblock of a bunch of guys literally with like pitchforks and flaming torches and trying to get to the airport to get the hell out of there. And he gave him his tag watch. So at that time, their currency was worthless. I mean, you couldn't even wipe your butt with it. So because that's economically related. So I think maybe people were trying to get hard goods that people have perceived value for.
Well, it's like even going back to World War II when Jews fleeing Germany were sewing gold and sewing diamonds and other jewels and jewelry into their clothing to get out. It wasn't money or anything else. It was just like hard assets that they could presumably convert back to currency when they got someplace else.
Yeah, absolutely. Interesting.
So no like big runs on toilet paper?
No, nothing like that. You can just use water, man. But I mean, the thing is that usually when a disaster hits, it hits people so hard financially, and then there's price gouging. You can't buy any of the stuff anyway. That's one of the things I saw. That's why I said go back to before, during a major natural disaster where people were starving on the streets, dudes are eating oysters on a half shell at the Ritz-Carlton.
Yeah, that was in the interview I was doing the other day. That was one of the things the guys I was doing the interview with asked, when that first 24 hours, what should we be getting and doing and stuff like that? And I was like, if you're out getting stuff in that first 24 hours, you're screwed.
Yeah, you're going to get stabbed.
Yeah, I was like, your butt needs to be making one of two decisions. Do I stay? Do I go? And what do I need to do to the location that I'm in if I decide to stay?
Yeah. And I mean, let all the people go out in the street and try to buy toilet paper and cat food at the last minute, and thin out the herd a little bit. You definitely don't want to be out there, man. I mean, I've been in like some pretty big protests before. It's pretty scary, It can turn, especially if you're overseas, you as a foreigner could definitely be considered a target. So, I mean, during a time of unrest in the third world, you don't want to be out on the streets. You don't want people to see you because a lot of times you represent wealth. which is something that is always the reason behind almost everything that happens in any sort of unrest in the third world, is it has to do with money. So you definitely don't want to be running around town in your golf shirt, trying to pick up some ramen noodles.
Well, now I'm glad you brought that up, because that actually, in a lot of different aspects, brings up the concept of gray. And I remember you wrote a little bit about it a while back, as far as like contractors.
And not wearing a 511 tuxedo through the airport in Jordan with an American flag patch on their arm.
Yeah. But I guess, and that applies in I guess disaster situations too. What does get people's attention and get them into trouble, besides just obviously being an American and running around looking extra tactical in situations where they don't have that kind of backup if things do go sideways?
You're referring to like a third world environment or the U.S.?
Well, I mean, I guess it would apply to either. I mean, as far as the concept of gray and it being a regional and situational thing.
Sure. In the U.S., I mean, the U.S. is such a diverse amount of people and cultures and colors and things like that. I mean, obviously, during an emergency, some sort of event that happens in the U.S., you don't want to show up on the street looking like an ad for Tactical magazine, with mole everywhere and tactical pants and things like that. You want to pretty much look like anyone else. You want to wear whatever people wear in the area where you are, on one side of town. Like if you're in a downtown area, like downtown New York in the financial district, well, you'll want to have a suit to fit in, But if you're down in the Bronx, Adidas running outfit will probably work better. So you basically wear what people in your environment would wear. And I mean, these days, tactical clothing probably doesn't stand out as much as it used to be, because cargo pants and things like that are popular. But then when people start choosing backpacks and things like that, where they want to carry things in, then it's like, 20 patches on the back of it, Velcro everywhere, mole everywhere, all sorts of shit hanging off of it. That in some situations can attract attention to you as being, hey, this guy's kind of prepared,
Mm-hmm.
At least in the first one. Also, I mean, if you're walking around in a riot with a backpack on anywhere, I mean, you deserve to get shanked, because it's silly. You want to avoid all of that stuff. As far as the third world goes, no matter what, you will not blend in. You're a foreigner. You're a foreigner in a country. I mean, maybe if you're Caucasian, yeah, sure, you could probably somewhat blend in Europe, but at the second you open up your mouth, you're a foreigner.
Mm-hmm.
So for places like Asia, where there's a huge amount of expats, just look like an expat. Cargo shorts and a T-shirt. That's what you look like. Now, if you're going to jump out on the streets with like 511 pants and a pair of lace-up boots and all these other things, a flak jacket, people are probably just going to laugh at you. I don't even know if they're going to rob you. But it's it's just blending in. It's looking like what people in your environment look like.
Mm-hmm.
It's like I always told people, if you get an apartment or something in the third world, choose an area where it's got a diverse amount of people in it, because then you going in and out doesn't attract any attention. Oh, like driving. I always think people are insane for driving in the third world, because if anything happens, it's always on you. Taxis are a good way to get around. Everyone's in a taxi. It doesn't attract any attention. A foreigner in a $40,000 car, that attracts attention,
Mm-hmm.
But like anywhere else, you don't wear a clown suit to the opera, So you do in the third world, you don't, wear a $10,000 Rolex and a nice stuff when you're trying to get through during a riot or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So just blending in.
Yeah.
Looking around. I mean, it's easy. You just look around. What do these people look like? Okay, I'll look like them. Like when I travel internationally, I like to do the backpacker thing, and I'm getting a little older for that. But pair of cargo pants, just regular, like a pair of Gap cargo pants, a T-shirt for like Bangkok pizza joint,
Mm-hmm.
No watch, and just a regular backpack walking around. I look like any other guy going through the airport, and I look like any other guy sitting on the airplane to anyone who would maybe want to have hijack it or cause problems or anything like that. I don't look like someone who's a threat.
Does that become an issue for a lot of guys, where it's they get into trouble because they look like they're about to cause a threat?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know the old saying: the first guy at a bank robbery that gets shot is the guard,
Hmm.
and that kind of that's everywhere. You know, the second that you look like a threat, then you are a threat, whether or not you are. You know.
Hmm.
So if you got like a 5'11" pants and a super tight affliction shirt on, and skull rings and all that other stuff, and you know you're going to look like, hey, take this guy out first. You know.
Hmm. Too funny. Yeah, I think I trained with that guy one time, on only one time.
There's about a million guys out there that people always say that the war in Iraq and Afghanistan, as far as contractors goes quadrupled the economy of Thailand and made whoever owns 511 and affliction rich.
Yeah. Yeah, I could see that. Oh my God.
Yeah, there are a lot of crazy people in this business, man. It's a lot of different personalities.
Yeah.
But,
So tell us, what does the future hold for Death Valley Magazine? You guys have we touched on a little bit in the beginning. Tell us more about what's going on over there.
well, the training is kind of the big thing that we're launching right now. Starting off with Tom Moore's Tomahawk Scout course. We've got some mobile stuff coming up. We've got a whole lot of different courses. I really feel like online training will be a viable option to a lot of the guys who can't get out and can't afford to train somewhere. Right now, I'm in one of the reasons, besides that it's freezing cold and I left a foot of snow in Virginia, that I'm in Thailand is on the 5th. Tom Moore and I are doing a expedition adventure tour in Cambodia, where we're going to be doing going around, we're going to the killing fields, shooting B-40 rocket launchers and M60s and things like that. So
Neat.
yeah, this is the first one actually for DVM expeditions. So we're going to start trying to make regular tours out of it here in the Philippines. They got a lot of cool stuff like underground gun markets and a lot of great places to learn survival skills. And we're also talking about maybe a trip to Israel later. So that's one of the things that's the main reason I'm doing that, because quite honestly, this basically breaks even at the end of the time. The main reason that I started doing that for the expeditions and the adventure tours, I know a lot of guys want to go over to a third world country or developing country, you know, experience the country, do some cool things, but not everyone's like me or a lot of other guys who just will be like, all right, I'm gonna throw on a backpack and a Lonely Planet guide and go there. You know, it's scary to do that too. Admittedly, the first time I did it, I was kind of frightened. So I wanted to create an environment where guys could go off, expand their horizons a little bit, see the world outside of the box that they've been living in the States or Australia or Europe or wherever, and do it in a way that a little less thinking involved, and they can also be there with some old hands who can kind of give them advice. It's like, hey, this is the first one for you. We get to help you out. We'll show you how to do everything. We'll teach you about the third world and traveling, and so the next time you go, you can do it on your own. So it's a combination of adventure tour and introduction to international travel in the third and developing world. And luckily, one of the great things on this trip that we're doing in Cambodia in a week or so is I believe two of the guys going have never left the U.S. before, which is the exact reason why I wanted to do it. Give guys a chance to do something that they never would have. And the first time you go overseas, the first time you go to a third world country, I mean, it clicks something off in your brain. I mean, it's there forever after you do it. You'll forever travel. And I'm not trying to sound noble or anything, but that I really want to inspire people to do that, to go out, see the world, have some adventures, you know, because originally that's what men were in America. You know, they would go out, they would go to the 49ers, they would go, you know, forge their way in the world, go on expeditions, go to South America or Europe and do all these great things. Now guys kind of sit around in a cubicle. And I think America as a country has really lost something without having that grit that men have from traveling and doing adventurous things and taking risks. So hopefully that will work out.
Well, very cool, man. I'm excited for you. And hell, I want to sign up now.
Oh yeah, man, you should come along.
Dude, that's awesome stuff. Well, James, man, I really appreciate you taking the time and working with me on the time zone difference here and coming on the show today.
Oh, absolutely. It's been a pleasure, man. This is my first radio podcast interview, so it's kind of cool.
Oh, well, cool, man.
You'll pop my cherry.
Thanks,
So I
Jay.
hope I wasn't too randomness about things, but I hope the listeners will bear in that I just woke up and I only got one cup of coffee so far, so I'm usually good by my second or third.
No, I think it came off great, man. Thanks.
I should have just had a couple scotches instead. That probably would have done a little better.
There you go.
Yeah.
Too funny. Well, thanks again, man.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Are you part of the solution? Spread the word about preparedness by reviewing In the Rabbit Hole on iTunes. It doesn't just let us know how we're doing, it also tells others the show is worth listening to. Review us today on iTunes. From the Lone Star State, till next time, stay safe and sound.